All right. Okay,
Here we
have
go.
you hit the record button?
I sure did. I just hit it. Yep.
Awesome. All right, well, welcome everyone. Welcome to our Art of Fishing workshop today. The art of asking the questions that yield the information you need. My name is Lori Evans. I'm an Access Advisor at Accessible Education Center, and my colleagues are here too. Go for it, colleagues.
Oh, introduce yourselves.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that. I am what am I? I'm an advising case manager with the Office of Academic Advising, and I use she pronouns. And Laura?
Yes, my name is Laura Schulte. I also use she, hers pronouns, and I work as a case manager and therapist at the UO Counseling Center.
And today, this workshop will cover some basic things about how to get the information you need. We're using the fishing analogy, the old adage that if you give a person a fish, they're full for a day. If you teach a person how to fish, they're full for a lifetime. And so this workshop isn't going to focus on the many, many resources that are available at UO, but what we will focus on are some of the things that you can access, the amazing myriad of things you can access, and really what happens when you get to the front door of the department or office where you want to get information. So that's where we're going to be today. I'll start with my pretty basic PowerPoint of learning to ask the right questions and what questions really yield. What are they? What kind of tools are they? So I'm going to start, and then Laura and Tyann will show you their world and what they can offer. So I'm going to try to screen share. Let's see if I can do this. Okay. Square. There, how's that?
Perfect.
Good, okay. All right, I'm gonna switch over here. Sorry, you guys, bear with me here. Okay. Gotta make it back. All right, here we go. Here's my name and my contact information, Lori Evans, how you can reach me, all that wonderful stuff. This is where I'm going to start. The quote from Marshall McLuhan. As you may or may not know, Marshall McLuhan was really a leader in the field of mass media in particular. And I like this quote because it helps us to think about what are we after? Are we really after facts and numbers and data? Are we after a way in which we can frame our thoughts in order to focus on providing the most effective questions for the search we're engaged in? So in order to make this a little more accessible, I'm going to read it aloud. The problem today isn't that we don't have the answers, but that we don't have the questions. So here's what I mean by we don't have the questions. In a university environment, in any kind of educational environment, we have learned that there's but one question that the instructor will ask us, and that one question has one right answer. And that's been kind of drilled into our heads ever since that we were engaged in grade school and middle school and high school. It's a very linear, back and forth, black and white kind of way of interacting. However, when you're looking at gathering information, gathering resources, doing research, really taking a look at your world in a innovative and different kind of way, the Socratic black and white, back and forth kind of engagement with the world isn't really that effective. Okay. So this is a nice, pretty tree. I want you guys to think about this tree and think about what are the questions you could ask about this tree? This is a little exercise. We're going to revisit this tree in a minute because in all transparency, I accidentally put this tree in the wrong order. So get a load of this tree. We're going to move on to the next slide for a minute. All right, so when we question, we take away the construct that what we're asking about is a fixed and never changing fact. When we start to ask questions about a construct, a thing, a tree, a resource, a campus activity, then we start suspending the concreteness of that fact and allowing us to think more fluid thoughts about that fact. So it gives us that opportunity to see that construct in a different way. And by seeing that construct in a different way, we can ask even better questions and get even more answers. Now, I know this is really philosophical in its nature, and we're not really getting down to the nuts and bolts of asking questions, but it's really important to understand the power of asking questions is definitely more of a fluid thing, whereas facts are much more of a concrete thing. So taking a look at this slide and kind of reframing your thoughts about what power questions hold. I want to go back to our tree slide here. So you can look at this tree and keeping in mind what we just talked about with respect to questions being a more fluid thing, think about the things you can ask about this tree. So if we look at it in areas, you can certainly focus on what is this tree made of? What does it need to survive? What other influences affect this tree? Where is this tree? Why does this tree grow here? Why don't other trees grow here? What does this tree do for the environment around it? Okay, when was this tree planted? Who planted this tree? What impact does this tree have on the environment around it in a historical construct? Again, who planted this tree? Who likes to sit under this tree? What kind of creatures are sustained by this tree? So, and of course, there's a myriad of environmental questions that you can focus on when asking questions about this tree, as there are philosophical things. So if you frame it in a way where you have a larger construct in which you can focus your questions towards a different fact or construct, it's much easier to come up with creative questions with respect to the resources or information you need. And I'm always kind of, in these types of PowerPoints, I'm always ready or encouraging audiences to ask questions. And in this question asking PowerPoint, I do want the audience to know that we will give you a chance to ask questions in a little bit. Okay, here we go, slide 6. So here's where we get into the fun stuff about the fishing expedition and sizing up your catch. The first question you're going to ask yourself is to you. The first question you're going to ask is of yourself. Where am I and where you want to be? Why this is so important is you have to identify, is this a fishing expedition that will require just a few direct questions to a few direct people to get the information you need? Or is this going to be a much longer process of a fishing expedition about how do I get into grad school? What grad school should I apply to? You know, and that's going to take much more resources in a much longer period of time with many more questions than will the most direct types of fishing expeditions you do. Okay. Cast a wide net. I think what people stumble upon is that they're afraid to ask questions of any people. So when I say cast a wide net, I say, don't be afraid to cover your environment, cover your social network with questions. You can start with proximity. Ask your roommate what they know about a situation, or an RA, or a classmate. Then you can move on to asking people that might have that fishing expedition in common with you. So for example, if maybe you're interested in something like study abroad, so maybe you can talk to somebody who's also interested in study abroad, or somebody who's actually gone on that fishing expedition and returned. So, and then you can ask experts of their opinion. So go to the study abroad office, find out what you need to know in order to apply. Talk to financial aid, talk to the specific experts in the area in which you need information. Tools in your tackle box. So this is pretty basic, but really, really important. Take notes, okay? Bring with you what is your favorite, most comfortable form of note-taking. Based upon what other people you've talked to or other resource gathering you've done, come with a list of basic questions. Part of the art of asking effective questions is your warmth, your friendliness, your particular brand of building a connection with the person to whom you're asking questions. This is super important, and this goes a long, long way to getting the information and more that you're seeking. Hey. Okay, so what you're going to do when you come to the person you want to talk to is you're going to introduce yourself, use that friendly smile. I would recommend handshakes in the past, but I'm not going to recommend that anymore. Use the person's name, find out who you're talking to, write their name down, try to use that name. It always makes people feel more heard, more understood, and welcomed to the conversation you're having. All those good open-ended questions like what, where, when, how, why. Try to avoid questions that end in yes and no answers, even though it's okay. If you think of a yes and no question, go ahead and ask it. You will, however, yield more information with the why, where, when, what kind of questions. So in my profession, a lot of times when I need to yield information from someone, but I don't really know what to ask, the tell me more is really handy. Or can you explain that? Or what if? So there's a lot of ways that you can kind of poke around for more detailed information after you've been given an answer. It's okay to take your time. Write answers down. As you're writing those answers down and you're taking time to think about what you're writing, more questions can be formulating in your head. So as I just mentioned, it's perfectly fine to take your time. Sometimes to us, when we're trying to think of a question, a few seconds will tick by and it might feel like the better part of an hour. It's okay to take your time. Your last question, what other information can you tell me? Is there anyone else you would recommend I talk to? Summarize what conversation you've had and the information you've learned. Thank them for their time, use their name. And finally, I really want to emphasize the fact that myself, Tyann, Laura, and hundreds of other faculty and staff are out there at UO. We want to hear your questions. We have our positions at UO because we love to work with students and we love curious students. So please, please, please always feel welcome to ask us any questions that are on your mind. And with that, I'm going to unscreen share. Am I going to unscreen share? And this is how I'll unscreen. There we go. All right, so as I mentioned, we'll give you guys time at the end of our presentation to ask questions, and I hope you have a lot of questions.
Thanks so much. So I came up in my role as an advising case manager, do a lot of answering of questions, just of a large variety and directing students to different resources. So, what I'm seeing a lot of times are questions that are kind of coming up in my office that I think might be something that a lot of us can easily relate to is students working to sort of figure out what barriers are in place. A lot of times students are reaching out for information to problem solve. And so in addition to kind of thinking about how to ask others, which we're going to kind of get to in a minute here, starting the process with questions for oneself. I think particularly when we're having a hard time, it can be it can be a common experience to become self-critical, to maybe give up, to maybe just again, there's a sort of a tendency to want to kind of curl up and hope that things go away. But it can be really helpful to do a little seeking around what might actually be happening. So, oops. So in terms of getting started, really just even the simple question of what's getting in the way. How am I struggling? In some classes, it might be, maybe you're in an upper division physics class, you've never taken physics, and so there might be some missing prior knowledge. It might be some challenges with the way information is presented in a particular class. Some students have shared with me that they're understanding information, but sometimes the assessment style isn't really pairing well with their strengths or the way in which they are able to communicate what they've learned. And then I have other students, and particularly lately with having moved remotely, where a lot of times it's trying to figure out new ways to improve time or task management when there isn't that sort of communal accountability as easily accessible in this remote world. So I have a lot of students who are struggling with activation and engagement. And so just even asking that instead of, a lot of times, again, students will share like, oh, I'm lazy, I'm unmotivated, I can't bring myself to care. There'll be an element of self-criticism there rather than, am I struggling with activating and staying engaged? I think a follow-up question that's really important is this difficulty with activation and engagement, is it across all areas of life? Or is it more specific to school and sort of, or maybe it's subjects that you're not as interested in? And that can be an important distinction. When it is kind of across all areas, that can be a really good time to reach out to the counseling center and get some additional support there. And we've got Laura Schulte is going to be talking a little bit more about how to do that. If it's school related, the Accessible Education Center might be a good place to reach out as well. And then I've got some other resources we're going to talk about here in a minute. Another question that comes up is, just, is it taking me longer than my peers to complete an academic task? Is it requiring more concentration on my part to decode the text and get through a chapter than a peer? Questions like, has this always been the case? Or again, is it more related to a particular subject that there may not be as much familiarity with? And if it's ever a matter of something just not feeling quite right, or something that's not easily explained by being just a poor match for a class, then reaching out to the various resources on campus. In terms of this sort of common challenge with engagement and sustaining motivation, I just wanted to present a few ideas about places to go. Again, I talked about, the Accessible Education Center, if it might be related to a disability-related barrier, be that depression, anxiety, ADHD, maybe a learning disability, or again, if it's more mental health related, the Counseling Center are all good resources for support with engagement and sustaining motivation if it feels like it's tied to something like that. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about how to use office hours in the Tutoring and Academic Engagement Center. Office hours can be incredibly intimidating. Last time we met for this workshop, I had a little video out of Arizona State University that was kind of lighthearted about fear of office hours. They had it as similar to a prescription drug commercial, and they were kind of making light of it. And I actually decided to take it out today because I think depending on our life experiences, going to office hours can be incredibly intimidating. And so it may not be the best choice for every student to start there. But if you do end up going to office hours, it's definitely, what do I do there is a common concern for a lot of students. And so just even wanted to point out that the Division of Student Life has some examples about how to get started with office hours, questions around how reading relates to course material, specific requirements and expectations on assignments. If you're comfortable checking in with an instructor about their research, how they got into their field, what interests them about what you're studying. This can be a nice way to establish engagement for students that find that social connections are really motivating. For some students, a class can be pretty dull. The subject material might be dull, but if they have a connection with a faculty member, it can be a reinforcing experience and keep them more engaged than they would otherwise be. And then even just like some general questions around how to do well in a specific class or major can be a good way to go. So again, it's a common question. And a lot of times I talk with students who they're uneasy about going to office hours, but it's not a hard barrier. It's something that they can push through. But again, they're kind of wanting to figure out the right questions to ask. And sometimes I think being able to demonstrate that you've done the reading, that you are engaged, can make that experience go a little bit smoother. So I was working on this element of the problem and I got stuck here. Can you help with this? or I want to write about this topic, but I'm not sure how to start. Even asking an instructor about questions that one should keep in mind when doing the reading. Like I'm seeing that these things are really important when I'm listening to lectures with this particular reading. Is there something that I should be looking for? Can help one kind of zero in and focus a little more. And similarly, I did the readings and this stood out to me. Is there anything I'm missing? And then again, if you're starting a paper, here's an outline with main argument and counter arguments. Am I on the right track? So having something lined up, you know, some questions lined up before you attempt to attend office hours can be really helpful. And again, having a question that shows engagement can often create a setting event for a more receptive response. There's also, so if office hours don't feel like a great way for you to work on engagement or to receive support for engagement and motivation, I'm going to do a strong shout out to the Tutoring and Academic Engagement Center. They're generally, when we're all together and not social distancing, they're on the 4th floor of the night library, and they have a variety of resources that can be really helpful. You can go to their website. They're offering all these things remotely. And so there's tutoring across the board, sometimes structuring your study time around times when tutoring's available, so that if you get stuck, rather than you know, clicking onto a web browser and getting distracted, it can be helpful sometimes to have someone available to kind of send a question off to, or hey, I'm working on this paragraph, can you help me with this? So they have live tutoring, and then they also have asynchronous tutoring where you can send us, particularly for writing, you can send a piece of your writing off and get a response a little bit later. The other thing that I wanted to just highlight in terms of the Tutoring and Academic Engagement Center is the learning specialists. There's a learning specialist for sort of general learning and writing, and then there's one that's centered around math. And both of these folks, there's Thomas Sylvester does the math, and Matt Chambers is a learning specialist for more kind of general study skills. And both of them are really active about thinking about how to help students build engagement, build motivation, and we'll work with you one-on-one to sort of figure out where the gaps are and what strategies might work for you. So utilizing supports on campus, it can make the process much more efficient instead of trying and maybe trying strategies and kind of discovering them on your own. It's like, here's what's worked for a lot of students, let's figure out what's working for you. Why isn't this working for you? It can just make a more efficient pathway towards getting your needs met around engagement and motivation. And then I also wanted to just share, I think the Office of Academic Advising or Tykeson, any kind of academic advisor, can be a great place to start. Lori was mentioning proximity, kind of all over campus, pretty easily accessible. And if you're ever when you have a question and you're not sure where to go with it, it can be a great place to start. You can get a referral. So that was, that was, I kind of jumped ahead a little bit with utilizing TAC, but yeah, just different levels of support there. And again, can be more approachable sometimes than going to a professor. There's not that same power differential that there is in a student-faculty relationship with an advisor or with a learning specialist at the TAEC. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to pass this on to Laura Schulte from the UO Counseling Center.
All righty, let's see if I can successfully share. Y'all seeing that?
Looks good.
All right, thank you. So yes, again, my name is Laura Schulte. I work at the counseling center as a senior staff therapist, but also a case manager. And I went ahead and listed, there we go, my contact information, as well as a colleague of mine whose name is Rebecca Fuller, because we both are in that same role of case management and just answering a lot of questions pretty regularly that are coming from students. And so you can reach out to either of us. But I just started my kind of list of questions, since that is certainly what we are trying to dig in with, around what in the world is a case manager. That's a broad term that's used in lots of different industries and across lots of different careers. But I think that, in my opinion, that there's a special skill set that any case manager might have to specifically answer questions, discuss options of support, help identify and complete the next steps, maybe even figure out your next question that you might have, and ultimately to connect you to resources. And that's exactly what each of us here, that's what our roles lend themselves to, and we really enjoy it. So I wanted to start off with just kind of maybe a little bit of validation in terms of what's happening currently for students, or at least what we're hearing a lot of and getting a lot of feedback. This is a very unique and interesting time. So yes, there is absolutely increased stress and anxiety levels happening that really is happening in terms of balancing the many different roles that we all are trying to fill. So whether that's school and work and just even the relationships that we're typically engaged in, there's a lot going on. So certainly having anxiety, or also anger, frustration about having to be confined and have these barriers, different things in terms of our regular routines that we used to be able to have. There can be an increased desire to use some coping mechanisms that, albeit maybe are not so helpful, and start to get into interacting with our sleep patterns, our eating patterns, just our basic self-care. And it's a tricky place to be. And yet, the boredom and frustration of navigating our current circumstances, again, it's a rough time. So wanting comfort, wanting to figure out how can we feel okay, it makes sense that there's some frustration there. And certainly increased symptoms of depression and feeling hopeless. Again, routines, big changes in routines, transitions. That's really a lot of what we're seeing. So I tried to also just put together a slide with just some basic, again, this isn't going to be the solutions, the answers to everything, but just some general suggestions. Connection is really important. Being able to use whatever means that you have to be able to connect, whether it is just through text, whether it's through video calls like this, and social media, being able to stay connected to friends, family, other folks who are in this, so that there is a sense of being together in it. Maintaining a routine, sticking to a schedule best that you're able, and certainly with sleep and eating are two big primary areas. What's tricky about connecting all online now is that exposing ourselves to too much media or too much screen time is also tricky. So trying to find a balance, taking breaks, being able to step away and not become too overwhelmed with all of the data out there. There's always an option of trying to focus on the things that we're grateful for, or things that we're feeling hopeful about, to try to balance out the things that we're frustrated about and trying to really grapple with. And to infuse some variety into our daily activities, trying something new. We were just commenting earlier, this has been such a time for creativity that's just abounding about how to problem solve. And so, using that creativity to maybe try something different can be really motivating as well. Shake it up a little bit. Specifically for mental health, I did put together some questions that one might ask themselves if they were thinking about, like, gosh, when do I know that it might be a good idea to talk to a mental health provider or just talk to anyone else about some thoughts that I've been having, some experiences that I've been having. So this is a list of those types of questions. Am I feeling, more hopeless or having some high frequency with thoughts of worthlessness, depression, self-esteem? Am I withdrawing? Am I pushing against that connection piece and really having difficulty, connecting with anyone? Are there changes in eating and sleep patterns? Are you having big mood swings? Feeling tired and exhausted all the time? Whew. I feel like there's an uptick in us, a lot of us being able to answer that with yes. Are you having trouble concentrating? Certainly with the switch to online everything, I think that concentration and tracking, there's just a lot of disruption there. So just really needing to validate that. Feelings of restlessness, irritability, yes. Agitation, absolutely. Excuse me. Any crying spells or stopping with caring about your routines and, appearance, personal hygiene. Again, back to those coping mechanisms, perhaps are you drinking or using drugs to excess or behaving in other unsafe ways, risk taking, things of that nature. And then physically, our health too, whether, again, I know that there's a lot of increased anxiety around COVID symptoms, but also just other ways in which our body is trying to absorb this stressful time. And certainly having any thoughts about death or suicide. All of these come from Active Minds, which is just a fantastic organization as well. But these would be examples of questions that if you're asking yourself those questions, we at the Counseling Center are here to help with those questions or even help provide some support around how scary it can be to be considering those types of questions. So, what is the Counseling Center? Who is eligible for services? So we are available for all enrolled students on campus. We provide confidential mental health services, and there's really no out-of-pocket costs for students. And that's important. I mean, again, there's a lot going on. Some folks are not even located in Eugene anymore. And still that also means that we can, in most cases, still provide support. So lots of changes, but certainly no changes with being able to really provide and answer questions and provide support. Teletherapy is a little bit of what we're doing right now. You'd be, except for it would be one-on-one with a therapist. So therapy over Zoom, and we have a secure version that really makes sure to protect, any kind of confidentiality, things of that nature. The list of states that we can also see students in is growing. Actually, I think it might have grown since this list was posted as well. So folks in Oregon, California, Colorado, Texas, I want to say that Minnesota and Arizona are now added as well, and we're trying to broaden that every day. Anyone can call the Counseling Center and you'll be guided with more next steps of moving that process forward if a student wanted to do some short-term therapy. We also have specialists that work at the Counseling Center. We have Black, African American student specialists, Latinx student specialists, international student specialists, gender support services student specialists. I'm forgetting one. Oh, and folks who work specifically with alcohol and other drug, kind of questions and kind of grappling with any needs around that as well. So if any of those areas or specialists sound helpful for your case, you can always ask to be connected with someone specifically. And then we do have a teletherapy frequently asked question section on our website as well, because I think that's also just can be a little bit of like, what am I going to be anticipating here? Is there any in-person support anymore? And, in fact, there is. The health center is still open, and we are located on the second floor of the health center. And we do still have a couple of front desk staff members who are there who are helping to connect a student to a behavioral health support person downstairs in the health center. So if someone were in crisis and needed to see someone right away, There might be some screening steps to go through in terms of, making sure that you're not having symptoms, having a temperature taken at the door, that kind of thing. But there is, in fact, still support in person if a student is needing it. Again, back to my role and how I specifically come in and help. Just by nature at the counseling center, if a student were to engage in some therapy sessions, we really have some limitations on how long we're able to see students. And so sometimes we've got folks coming in who maybe have had a therapist in the past and who are really wanting to find a therapist that they can begin working with and not have to stop after a term, which is about the length that we typically see students at the counseling center. And so if someone wants to start out with someone that they can continue with for maybe the whole academic year, or maybe their whole academic career for that matter, that's when I can also help them get connected and talk about things like insurance and health insurance, and finding an in-network provider that's going to have a low cost, or maybe even no cost. If health insurance isn't on the table, then there's other resources that we can help connect students to. So that usually is an area that I am very busy in helping to answer some questions. Again, calling the counseling center line at the 541-346-3227. At this point, even when we're not open, you're going to be able to talk to a therapist over the phone. So just know that's a 24-hour line. When we are open, where we'll answer your questions, and when we're not, we'll still be available for support. I went ahead and listed some other options here for SAFE, which again is related to sexual violence and is also a 24/7 hotline. The National Suicide Prevention Line, also this text resource that I think is really fantastic. And certainly if there's an emergency, calling 911. And again, to direct you all to our resources on our website, this is a place that has been expanding probably by the day because we're listing a lot of things that are out there that have been helpful. We've made some new blog posts in our Be Well blog. We have started doing a podcast in the DuckTales, which is the wellness podcast. And those two most recent topics, how to get good sleep, and then what to expect if you were to use our crisis line. So again, there's just different things that are happening on our Instagram and Facebook pages that are really trying to even probably answer your questions before you're asking them to try to put information out there. And again, a couple of other areas are coping strategies on our website, and list lots of options for reaching out. Again, there is a wealth, that is a rabbit hole that would keep you busy for quite a while on our website, which is just counseling.uoregon.edu. And with that, I will pause and open the floor back up here. Maybe I'll stop sharing and open things back up for any questions, whether that be for me, for Lori, for Tyann, for any and all of us. We're happy and available to answer them.
Now comes the awkward silence while you're working hard on coming up with your questions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Veronica. I have a question. I'm wondering if the templates that you shared, Tyann, around like questions, sample questions to ask, I think that you shared that those were attached to a website.
Yeah, so
Student Life.
yeah, Student Life has they have 5 ways, kind of icebreakers for office hours. Yeah, so that's on the Student Life website.
Okay. Is it also linked to Dean of Students stuff, or is it like I guess I'm wondering, like, how is it housed? I know we have like the general remote student support website right now, but especially in a time where high contact is going to make a big difference, I'm wondering if it can be linked or like connected to the main remote student services support page, because it just seemed like really direct and like these are things I could actually say right now.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I think that would be great. I don't know like how we do that exactly, but maybe you do with your tech experience these days.
Maybe.
But yeah, I think getting that set up. And then also I just wonder, you know, some of the other questions were things that I just had, I don't know how much specific questions are helpful. The Dean of Students resource was a little bit more generalized, but I've definitely have over the years coached students to, you know, again, just some sort of demo, like I've been here, I'm tuned in. I'm not asking because, you know, yeah, because I haven't been paying attention, you know, just, it feels like a lot of times that can be really helpful for students to,
Yeah.
even if they haven't, you know, or have been having a hard time tracking, just to at least have something to, you know, not get that, to get a more positive response. I think I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the things that I know, since Tyann and Veronica have some history as AEC advisors, I recommend to AEC students, I recommend that they allow their faculty to put a face with a name. So in AEC, students that do receive accommodations will send out their notification letters notifying their faculty of their accommodations. And that's great. That's really what they need to be doing. But if they're unsure of how their accommodations are going to occur, or how certain aspects of their accommodations will be recognized, I say it's always good to allow your teachers, your instructors, your GEs to put a face with the name. Stop by office hour and say, hey, I'm so-and-so. I think you received my notification. Just wanted to say hello and let you know who I am. You know, that goes a long way to building the groundwork for when you do have a question or you do have an issue surrounding your accommodations. And, you know, that's true for every student, not just AEC students. If you're a first gen student, or English is your second language, or you're an international student, or you know, there are any number of reasons why you might want to give your instructors a heads up about where you're at and what your needs are. And it's really great at the beginning of the term to maybe even at the end of class or beginning of the class, you know, hello, Professor Smith, I'm so-and-so, I'd just like to introduce myself. That goes a long way to reducing that anxiety and nervous feeling when you do have to go to office hours and, you know, explain that you're not understanding an assignment or something. And that's true for other things, you know, other departments, or, you know, part of what a student will be doing their first, you know, maybe year at any university, but also particularly at UO, is building that network of people that you can turn to at any time. And maybe turning to that person for the first time is challenging. Turning to that person the second, third, fourth, and fifth time over the course of your time at UO, it's going to be a whole lot easier and a whole lot more effective. So allow people to get to know you. Put yourself out there.
That's well said, Lori.
Well, it comes with a lot of practice.
Yeah.
And I know that we've had audience members come and go, some pretty cool ones. So I'm glad that everyone has stopped in. And you guys have any other final bits of wisdom to share?
No question too small, no
Yeah.
question too silly. And even if you don't know what question you even have formulated, we are available to even help that process come together.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
That's exactly right. I always say, go ahead.
Oh, so sorry. I had a question about, so there was an instance like last term, I believe, when I asked for like an extension on an assignment, and like the teacher wasn't able to give it to me. So it's kind of off topic. What's the appropriate way to respond to a no?
Great
It's a
question.
good question. Laura, Tyann, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I guess, so you had an accommodation for flexibility with the deadlines. Was that something that was in place, or is it more just when you've requested an extension and someone says no?
It was for a personal reason, and I had like talked to someone and like sent like this whole template, and I got a no still. So I just don't know what the appropriate way is. Yeah.
Yeah, that can be, I think in those, in a situation like that, you can always reach out, if you have an access advisor, that's a really good place to go, because their role is to actually be the negotiator with that. If you don't have, you know, the ADA behind you, then I think reaching out to someone, like myself, a case manager at the Office of Academic Advising. I have a colleague there, Joseph DeWitt, who's also in that role, or even an academic advisor could at least start that conversation and maybe explore whether or not there might be some ways to renegotiate something. And again, depending on what the circumstances are, it can be really different. I think a different response. But if you're ever feeling like something really isn't quite right, I would encourage you to just check in with someone else and see if there might be other options or other sources of support. Yeah.
And, one thing that I've been mindful of more recently, that going remote and the whole pandemic has brought to my attention, is that we all have stuff going on that others don't see. So when you ask for an extension of a deadline, and it might not be a disability related thing, it might not be an academic, it's a personal thing, and you do your best to explain your situation and why, it might soften the blow and allow you to have a little more grace if the professor says, no, I can't accommodate you in that way. If you preface, expecting a response by telling yourself, I get that I don't have all the information here, and I get that everybody has stuff they're dealing with that is not seen. So I don't know, maybe I'm talking in circles. Sometimes there has to be a no. And I think the best way to respond to that is just with grace and say, well, I understand your position. I respect your position. However, you can frame it to soften the blow for you, because be mindful too that, when I have to say no to a student or my children or someone I know and care about, it's hard to say no. And it's hard to let that person down. And so be mindful that it's probably not very easy for them to give you a no as much as it is for you to hear a no. Does that make sense?
Totally.
But lean on us too. I mean, just because you hear a no doesn't mean that you can't go talk to someone else and share your perspective and see if there's another way a person looks at it. And that's what we're all here for.
Absolutely. And I think too, the only thing I would echo that hasn't maybe been said is, and it's entirely possible that this happened as well, but it's okay to ask for more clarification and understanding around the no, and that's okay. I think there's a lot of cases where maybe the outcome won't change, but understanding a little bit more about the barriers or the bounds that someone is making them inside of can really help demonstrate for both parties, in my experience, that just because the answer may not change, it doesn't mean that there's not care involved in there, and that there's empathy. And so, and a lot of that isn't able to be communicated in an email or a, so I think being able to follow up and just ask, like, gosh, I'm just sitting with this. I hear that this is the answer, and I'm trying to understand more around, why this has to be the case, or if there's any more you can tell me around this. And I think that that can also, like, it's okay. It's okay to ask, for some more follow-up, and ask for that process to be as transparent as possible too. And ask for help with that process if that feels really scary, because we're all not afraid to ask those questions and are happy to help advocate as well.
Really good question.
Can I share one thing? I'm with the University UO Online unit. And one thing that we've been focused on a lot this term, like you said, that this was last term that you had an extension that you'd requested. So that was during winter before the international pandemic, like, turned everybody sideways. The Academic Continuity Council for the university has asked instructors to be more flexible this term, spring term. And so if the extension request that you made was this term, I think it's useful to keep in mind that instructors are kind of like have a moving target right now too. So like Tyann and Lori and Laura all said, like, asking for more information, drawing on your advisors, especially right now in a time when, like, the information that instructors are getting around these policies is shifting, might be useful. So, yeah.
Thank you.
That was a great question.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Will this information be available for us, like the content that was on the slides?
Another good question. And yes, we're working that out. We are recording the workshop, and we can provide, we got to figure out where we're going to post it, but we can provide the slides for our respective PowerPoints and all the resources within them.
Okay, thank you.
Be on the lookout. We'll, my best bet is the AEC website will provide information as to how to access all the workshops. So I think at this point, that's your best way, if you just visit the AEC website, and we'll post how to access that information. And how about you, Tyann and Laura, do you have any thoughts on how they can access it?
I agree with you, and I have a feeling that we'll just put these all together as a little package, and for any of the workshops that have, been given in the past, that there will be a period of time where there will be access to kind of, here's what was talked about, so that anyone at any time can hop in and be able to kind of consume this information. So yep, I agree with you, Lori. I think it'll be in the same spot of where it kind of was born, so to speak, of where those workshops were first listed.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming.
Thanks for your engagement.
Yeah.
Thanks, Veronica.
Yeah.
What a treat to see familiar and new faces. Thanks for making this happen.
Definitely.
It's our pleasure.
Yep.
It's great to meet you virtually. I can't wait to meet you when we're all back on campus.
Totally. And Kelly, thanks for coming by and sharing that question. I think that it's actually, the hardest question, and a really great one. So thank you.
Thanks so much for the workshop.
You bet.
Thank
Happy
you.
to do it.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.